This video, I'll be showing you how to make a graph on Google Sheets. Before we start talking about how to graph on Google Sheets, I just wanted to quickly do a reminder of the lab you just did. You did a lab on density, and we know that density is equal to mass divided by volume. And then we're going to graph the data that you took from the class and isopropyl alcohol and ethylene glycol. But before we do that, I want to remind you of what slope is. You know slope from algebra is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We want to look at slope and look at density, and we're going to match, we want our density to be our slope when we graph this. So see how y is in the numerator or on the top, just like mass is. So that means we want mass to be all of our y coordinates, and x is in the denominator or on the bottom. So volume in our density formula is on the bottom. So this will be all of our x coordinates. And we know that it goes x comma y when we have an ordered pair in algebra. So when we do this, when we go to enter our data, we're going to make sure that we put our volume coordinates in the first column and our mass in the second column. That way the slope when we graph it will be equal to the density. So when we go to graph, remember slope will be the average density. In other words, the average of the class data. So you don't have to actually calculate an average. When we do the line of best fit, the slope of that line is going to be equal to the average class density. Okay, so the techniques I'm about to show you, you can use for anything when you're graphing on Google Sheets, but I'm going to use specific data from this lab. But you can watch it for other classes or other graphs that you might have to make throughout the year. So what you want to do is you're going to go to your Google Drive and you want to create a new, and you want it to be Sheets and you want a blank spreadsheet. So remember, we just said that we have to have volume as our x coordinate, mass as our y coordinate. So in column A, I'm in column A, this is my first column, I'm going to title this volume. And we know that when we calculated the volume or we recorded the volume, we did that all in milliliters. So I'll have the units in parentheses. I'm going to tab over, and my second column is going to be mass, and this one is going to be in grams. Those were the units we had on our balance. So go through and enter your data. You can do it either for your ethylene glycol or your isopropyl alcohol for your class data. It doesn't matter which one you do first. You're going to do this 2 times, one for each graph. Put in the data from your class and make sure that you match up the volume and the mass for each individual group's data. Don't mix them up. It's got to be consistent. So if the first group had a volume of 7.6, let's say, then their corresponding mass in the data I have is 5.91. And you're going to go through and fill in all of the data. So you might want to pause the video. This is going to take me a minute to get some data in here, and you can do the same. But just make sure that you are not putting units in. Notice on this data, I'm not having a unit. I'm just putting the digits, the numbers. So the unit I already have at the top. So go ahead and fill this in. And like I said, you might want to pause as you're doing it. Just about done. And remember, your data is not going to be the same as mine. This is just data that I have gathered from another class. So once all of your data is entered, and you might want to double check that everything matches up, the next thing you want to do is you want to highlight all of this information. So I'm going to put my cursor in the top left where it says volume, and I'm going to drag and hold until everything gets highlighted. Okay, so everything's now highlighted in blue. From there, you're going to go up to the top and you're going to hit insert, and you want to insert a chart. Takes a second and your chart will pop up. So some things, if yours doesn't look similar to mine right now, what you want to make sure, mine is under scatter. If yours looks different, maybe yours looks like this, or Sometimes it'll look like a bar graph. Whatever it is, you don't want that. You're going to scroll where it says chart type, pull the little arrow down, and you're going to do the one that's got a bunch of dots on it. So there's my graph. Then you're going to scroll down a little bit more, and yours might right now, sometimes it comes up like this, where you've got red and blue dots. The reason you have that is because you need to make sure that use column A's labels is clicked on or check marks there. If it's not, put the check mark in and you'll see all the red dots go away. So here it is when it's unclicked, here it is once it's checked, okay? So from that, we're pretty ready to do the next step. We're gonna go to customize at the top right, and you're going to scroll to where it says series. Click on series and you're going to get some more options. You can change the colors and things, but not necessary because you're going to end up printing it in black and white. And what you want to do is I scroll down, it's near the bottom, is trend line. Put a check mark next to trend line. Now, automatically it's going to appear as linear. You want it to be linear. If it's, these are other choices, logarithmic, polynomial, exponential, so forth. You don't want those. Make sure that your trend line is linear, okay? Then scroll down once you're there. There's a section that says label. Right now it's clicked none. Pull the tab down and scroll to use equation. So right here, notice there's no equation, but where I'm highlighted right now or where it's a box, when I click use equation, my equation shows up there. Okay, so make sure you have that on there. Other things that you can do here is you can make sure that your axes are labeled. Well, since we had originally put at the top of our columns mass in grams and volume in milliliters, that part's done for me. But what I do want to make sure I have is a title. So I'm going to make sure I've got a title in 1 second. Okay, so there's all that stuff, but if we scroll back up here, chart and axis titles. So I scrolled back up to the top. Right now it just says mass versus volume. That's not a great title because it doesn't tell me what this graph is about. I happen to graph the class data for isopropyl alcohol, and the class data, this is representing the density because it's mass versus volume. So I'm going to title this the density of isopropyl alcohol. Okay. And then see, change my title. That way it's more meaningful because I know which specific data this is. I know that's isopropyl alcohol, not the ethylene glycol. Now my graph is all done. Notice it made a nice straight line, which it should. If our class did good data, everything should be pretty close to a straight line. In this second number here, it should be pretty close to 0. So we know our equation. I'm going to just click back to my document here. You might remember from algebra that you have a formula y equals mx plus b. So this is slope intercept form, right? So this right here, this is our slope. And remember that we said the slope is the average density for the class data. We want this b to be as close to 0 as possible. So for our graphs, this should be about 0. The closer it is to 0, the better our class did is data, like the better we gather data. So now when we go back and look at my graph, find my graph, this number right here, 0.784, that is my slope, which is the average class density. And this number, negative 0.0621, is pretty close to 0. So our class did a great job, or this class did a great job on it. So the last thing you want to do is you want to copy this chart onto another sheet, a blank Google Doc. So if you're not clicked in it, so if I click over here, not on the chart anymore. Click back in the chart and see how these 3 dots appear. Click that and you're going to say copy chart. Then I'm going to go back to my drive. I'm going to make a new blank Google Doc. So blank doc. I'm going to then right click into my document and I'm going to copy my image. And make sure that you don't copy it as a link. You want to actually copy it as a, or paste it. Shoot, I said copy earlier. I already copied it from the other page, right? Let's go back. Maybe it didn't copy. So get my 3 dots. I'm going to copy chart, go back to my blank document, right click, I'm going to paste, and then I don't want to do the link. I just want to click the link to spreadsheet. And there's my graph and everything that I just had. Then eventually you will graph or copy your second graph below it. So graph one is done, and you'll repeat the same steps for your second graph. So you should have a graph for both liquids. So you might want to rewatch this video. Again, I would suggest that as you watch it, you pause it and you do the steps as you're going through. And that might help you find all the different buttons that I showed you. Of course, if you need help, you're always welcome to come in and ask for help outside of class. We're happy to help you get everything graphed.